Good morning, everyone. Today, I'd like to look at one of our new features that has just recently been released, and that is the new modern web browser control. Some people call it the Edge control. Other people refer Web View 2. Whatever you call it, the new web browser control that we now have in Access. Now, per the usual, I have articles on the subject. I'm going to touch upon two, but we're going to be cutting it down a bit. There's an issue with the new control, which is going to inhibit me being able to demonstrate everything I'd like to demonstrate today. So I'll have to come back at a later date with a second video to fill in the gaps once Microsoft solves the problem. But as you can see, I have one on advanced automation, and the one we're really going to concentrate on today is this one here. I basically replicated what I had previously done in this article here for the older web browser control. So in it, as you'll see, I've broken it down into sections. So depending what you're looking for, you just go to that section and you'll find examples. So let's dive in. Basically, let's go over the known limitations and then what has been improved upon from the old version. So limitations. Well, the first limitation is this control is only available to Microsoft 365 subscribers. Access 2021, 2019, 2016, doesn't make a difference. You will not get this feature. And not only is it MS 365 subscribers, but you have to be on the beta or the current update channel. Obviously, it will flow down to the other channels in time, but right now those are the only two channels that offer it. Future releases obviously will have this feature, so eventually if there's an Access, 2024, 2025, whatever the case may be, it will be stitched into that version at that point in time as well, I'm assuming. Limitations, we're going to look at this more in detail in a bit. The trusted domain, it's a new quote-unquote feature, and we'll talk about it later. There's also an issue with assigning the control source via VBA, where it's limited to 2,000 characters, 2,048. For most people, this is truly inconsequential, but for certain advanced users doing advanced things, Google mapping with lots of points and things like that, this is an issue. You can use Navigate. I believe Navigate doesn't have the problem, for instance. So anyway, things to consider. Another major issue that hopefully will be resolved soon is if you're using local paths, files, they cannot include spaces. The minute there's a space, it doesn't work. Help during my testing simply doesn't work. You're on VBA, on methods, properties, you press F1 to get help, and you're just sent to generic pages that have nothing to do at all with the web browser control. The other thing with the help, even when you do go on the help, it's very generic. It doesn't offer much information beyond what you probably already were able to deduce on your own. So I'm hoping we'll see them beef up the help files. I hope they'll add some examples, and that's why I have this page in reality. It's to try to fill in the gap and do some examples and demonstrations, and people can see concretely how to use the different procedures and whatnot. One thing that I was having issues with at one point is I found with the web browser control that it was slow. It was freezing my Access installation. I even sent screenshots to the dev team at one point where my Access ribbon was no longer rendering when I had the web browser doing whatever it was doing. So there's some optimization, some issues there. I don't know. I've also been doing more recent work. It hasn't happened again. So I'm not 100% sure, but I did at one point experience some quite extensive issues with the web browser and Access freezing, locking up, having to kill the process and things like that. When it comes to advanced programming, if we talk about the old browser control, we used the web browser object document, and with that we were able to interact and do all sorts of things. That no longer exists in this new Edge web browser control. So it complexifies automation and, parsing, web scraping, analyzing, whatever you want to call it, to a certain extent. But I eventually finally found a workaround. So we'll talk about that later. I'm going to jump back to this in a second. My update here, there's the RetrieveJavascriptValue. We are going to talk about it extensively later. It was working fine when I wrote the article. That's why I have the different examples. I was able to test. It worked. It no longer does. This is an absolute deal breaker. So until it gets fixed, I can't produce any more demos. I have several on the back burner that I developed, and now I'm unable to complete because of this most recent bug. Coming back to the issue, I just want to mention again, the web browser is a new feature. With any new feature coming from Microsoft, at least, it means there are problems, there are bugs, there are issues. You have two choices in life. You can either take them for what it is, use it, you're going to hit walls, you're going to get frustrated. As I've just mentioned with the RetrieveJavascriptValue, you'll even get to a point where they may not even work at all. But you can do that and try to, learn, contribute I've sent tons of feedback to Microsoft about this. And it is what it is. Or your other option is sit back 6 months, a year, 2 years. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take Microsoft to gather information and do what needs to be done to fix all these issues. But you can sit back and wait and try it at a later date when other fools such as myself have ironed out all the problems. It is a new feature. There are issues. This is not a trouble-free feature. Okay, now enough of issues and problems and considerations. What about improvement? Why do I want this over the old one? Well, if we talk about the old one for a minute, especially if you get into local files, we had to do the mark of the web. We had to do, compatibility meta tags. There's different issues that came up. You no longer have to do any of that. If we talk about the old one, we had to do quite often a registry hack, because by default it emulated, if I remember correctly, Internet Explorer 7. So unless you did a hack to get it up to 11 or emulate an early version of Edge, you don't need to do any hack anymore. It's going to be running Edge. The new version completely supports, I shouldn't say completely because it doesn't completely, but it supports modern CSS, JavaScript, etc. There are some issues there. I've found one myself. I'm waiting to hear back from Microsoft about it because there is a certain JavaScript that I can run fine in Edge, and yet I do it in the web browser and it doesn't work. So I'll post, there'll be an article on that at one point when I have information back from Microsoft on the subject. Another beautiful thing is we can now right-click inside the web browser control when it's displaying a page to bring up the developer tools. So you can now access and inspect the page. You can access the console to test JavaScript. You can do all sorts of things, and it truly does help programming. The new web browser control beauty here is it now works in forms and reports, and not only in forms and reports, but continuous forms and reports, which is absolutely beautiful. Compatibility. Compatibility, I've already mentioned, it is only available in Microsoft 365. So you're not going to get this in older versions. If you develop it and then you distribute it to a user that isn't on 365, they basically get a blank screen wherever the web browser control was supposed to be. Runtime. Once again, only the MS Access 365 runtime can support this feature. It was supposed to have been released last month. Something happened. I don't know any of the details. It's supposed to come out this week as of the recording. So it may already be out in the new version of the runtime. I'm not quite sure, but if it isn't, it will be out very shortly. So you'll be able to support it with a runtime as long as you're using the Microsoft Access 365 runtime. Okay. One particularity about one specific method is the RetrieveJavascriptValue method. I just wanted to point out here the semicolon. When you issue a JavaScript command, anyone that knows this stuff, you always terminate it with a semicolon. However, when you use it in the RetrieveJavascriptValue method, you do not include the semicolon or it will not work. Don't ask me why. I flagged this. It's an issue. Because you'll see when you do the execute JavaScript method, you have to include it. So there's an inconsistency here. The other issue, like I mentioned above, the big bug warning is currently this method does not work at all. And that's a much bigger issue than having to remember to take off a semicolon or not. Trusted domains. Trusted domains, it's one of these things. I'm assuming it's a security quote-unquote feature here. But basically what it is if you bring up a page, and on that page there are links that redirect you to another site, another domain. So think of Google. You do a Google search, all of the return values point to different websites. Well, if you click on any of those links, they're not going to open in the web browser control. It's instead going to launch your default web browser, full-blown version, and it's going to load it there instead. So you get all these pop-ups happening. The way around this is to define a trusted domain table, and you can name it whatever you want, in which the first column has to be your listing of domains that you're trusting. So you could go in there, and let's take my blog, for example. You do a search on Google. There's a link to my blog. So you'd add www. Here we go. I'll just show it here. You'd add this, what's highlighted in blue, into that table. So you're trusting my domain. So you don't need the article or any of that. You just need the domain portion of the URL. And you'll add that to the table. You'll assign that table as a trusted domain property for your web browser control. We're going to demonstrate in a minute. And by doing that, when someone clicks on the link, then instead of opening the full-blown version of your browser, it will actually return it directly in the web browser control in Access. We'll talk about this later with concrete examples. But the trusted domains is a real, pain in the ass. It makes no sense. They're still opening the URL. They're just not doing it in the web browser control in your Access database. They're going and launching your browser, which makes no sense if it was truly a security issue here. I truly don't get this. There's several other points that I have in the article, but it makes no sense. Control source and navigate. You'll see when you define statically as a property of the web browser, the control source works beautifully. In my testing, however, using VBA to define it, it does not. And instead, in VBA, always use navigate. Expected formats. Short, sweet, and simple here is you have to include the protocol. Okay? Supplying www. Will not suffice. It won't work. So if you want a URL, you have to include https:// and then your domain. I'm hoping they'll address this. There's no reason why they couldn't. If you pass a www, that they don't just prefix it with the secure HTTPS prefix. Moving on, let's look at this. This is where we're going to dive in a little bit. Static hard-coded URLs. Okay, so I've got this database. It's on my website. I have it there as a download for you guys. So don't worry about copying code. Just go download it and have fun. But we have static URL here. And as the article explains, all you have to do is set the control source. Let's open this guy up for a second. And you make it equal, quote, the URL, quote. That's it. You save it. We're going to remove the trusted domains for a second so we can illustrate trusted domains. So we're going to close this guy out and save it. So it's just a simple static URL pointing to Google, nothing out of the ordinary. So we open it up. And you'll see there's a small delay here, but it will eventually render Google. And let's just do a simple search. Just bring up my blog, for instance. And now we're going to demonstrate this whole thing about trusted domains. So Google has returned, I'm still on Google, it's returned here a link. And this link, we all know, is going to point to my blog, which is a different domain. Now, instead of being in Google, it's going to be pointing to devhut.net. Now, if I click on it, watch what happens. It is now gone, and in my Edge browser, loaded the web page. Okay, so we're no longer in Access. It's booted me out of Access because we're switching domains, and that isn't allowed unless it's defined as a trusted domain. So what we have to do is come in here and add devhut.net. But as you can see, it already is there, but it isn't enough. Then you have to come in to the web browser control itself, and you have to assign trusted domain to the table that holds your trusted domain. So I named mine trusted domains. I made it pretty easy to understand. Now that I've assigned it, when it loads, it's going to check that table for which domains it's allowed to, I guess, redirect to. And then if it's in that list, we'll allow it. So now, because we've assigned the trusted domains table to the control, now when I click on it, it will load it in the web browser instead of pushing it out to Edge itself. So that's the whole thing with the Edge browser and trusted domains. But like I said, it doesn't make sense to me because one way or another, it's still opening the URL. It's just not opening it where you asked it to. Anyway, so that's for a static URL. What about a static local file? A static local file, you're going to see here in the content local file, is there's a new thing. There's a new catch or twist. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to alter it for 2 seconds, and then we're going to come back and you'll see. So by default, if we just looked at this, okay, I'm telling it, go get this file on my desktop. A simple HTML file. Okay, and let's just take a look at the file very quickly, just so you guys can see how simple this file truly is. It's nothing. HTML with a bogus head and a body with a single line. Like, this is nothing, okay? Instantaneously load. We double click, it opens instantaneously in Edge. So now, like I said, in Access, we've assigned it, right? We've assigned it to our web browser. And now if we open it, it opens it in Edge. Why? Because the new twist is we have to prefix any file path and name with https://msaccess/, and then the file path and file name. So if we do that, and come back here into Design View, and if we prefix it with that protocol, now the web browser is authorized to open the local file. But notice the delay. The web browser I find personally to be slow in a general sense, but it is uglily slow when it comes to opening or working with local files. It works, but it's just slow. So that's all you need to know about local files. Remember that prefix here. Otherwise, it pops it up continuously in Edge. URLs from a table, well, that's a beauty. It's basically the same as what it was before. So if we take from a table here, so I have a table with some URLs here, nothing complex. I bound the form to the table, and then I bound my control to the field that has the different URLs in it. The minute you do that, it works without any question. And then you can navigate between your records, and it will load and load appropriately. You can, as we mentioned, one of the improvements is this now works in a continuous form. So now the same table, but in a continuous view. As you can see, there can be delay because now it's processing multiple URLs depending on how many web browsers fit on the screen at the time. So you have to give it a bit of chance here to process all the data, but it works. And then if you go down, you'll get the next one. One thing I will say is there's a bit of lag in rendering. So here I've got MSN, Bing, and above it is Google. But if I scroll up fast enough, you see how Bing momentarily was at the top, even though it shouldn't have been. So there is a little lag for the fix in the rendering, but it works. And it works beautifully in reports as well. URLs from VBA, really simple. Like I mentioned above, all you do is pass it to the navigate. So however you want to do it, you pass it directly, you pass it as a variable, you pass it from a control. They all work. There's no issue there. So you can come here and in the events, I just use the load, but you come here and you just tell it, I'm passing Google here just so it's visible to the user. And then I'm taking that same value, so Google, and I'm passing it to the navigate method. And by doing that, like I say, it loads Google for me. Okay. And just to prove it, in case anyone was wondering, if you come here, there is no control source. So I'm not tricking you guys in any way. It really is just the VBA. So the object name, so in this case, I just left it at default, Edge Browser 0. And then navigate, the method, and then what URL to navigate to. If you're navigating using a local file, don't forget that prefix, https://msaccess/. But you can navigate even to local files. Content from local files, we've touched upon this. Like I said, you can navigate to them. Do note, however, that you're not limited to just navigating to HTML files. You can do images, text files, comma-separated values, PDFs, JSON. Anything you can open in Edge, you can do through the web browser control now. As I mentioned here, it's slow at loading local files. And as I also mentioned previously, it can't handle file paths or names with any spaces in them, so be forewarned. I'm sure that some of this will be addressed, but right now, no spaces. Blank page, you just simply navigate to About Blank. The beauty right now is if you just throw an Edge browser into a form and you don't assign it a control source, it actually opens blank. So you're not getting any errors or weird messages. It's already going to just be blank. So you only need to use this if you truly want to go to a blank page for some reason. So if we just come here, for instance, it's going to load Google for me. And once it's loaded, I can press the blank button and you'll see it brings me a blank page. So if you have any situations where you need to do that, you can easily do it with a single line like I show here. So your object name, navigate into the About Blank. About the browser, sometimes it's useful to know what browser is Access currently emulating. I have a script that I did and it'll be a local file, but more and more I'm just saying point yourself to this website. There are others. If you prefer another one, just use that. But this I'm providing you this because, well, I know it exists and it works. And I have a demo here. Let's close this. And you just open it. It will load that page and it will give you all the information you need. So as you can see, you're using Edge, and if you go down further, you'll get more information. Windows, IP address, resolution, blah, blah, blah. Okay, getting the URL. Perhaps your user has navigated to a different page and you want to extract where they currently are. It's very simple. Get the page URL. And where am I? I'm on Google. DevHut. Where am I? I'm on Google. Here's the search, the whole URL. And if you go in to look at how it's done, it's very simple. It's just the browser control name, and we're using location URL to do it. You could also use a JavaScript command to do the exact same thing, but this one is built in. It just makes your life a little bit easier. And this is where things get a little sour, is although I'd like to show you some of the retrieve HTML source, and we're going to show a little bit later some of the more advanced things, I cannot because of the bug related to retrieve JavaScript value. That function, should I say method, does not work currently. I will have to do another video at a later date. Refreshing the web page, very simple once again too. So if we come here, it loads Google. So I start typing in my thing and I want to refresh the page. I've changed my mind. Just press refresh and there we are. We're back to where we were initially. And if you look at it, nothing to it. It's just using refresh. Very simple. Executing code. Well, that's the beauty here, is we can actually execute any JavaScript code you want. So you want to pop up displays, you want to run some function that's on the page, whatever you need to do, you can do it. And Microsoft has provided the execute JavaScript. So let's take a look at this guy, run.js. And if it loads the page, once it's loaded, I can press my run button and you'll see google.com says hello world. So this is not coming from Access at all. You can tell anyway just by the message box and the button and all of that. Access doesn't offer that type of modern rendering of controls and things like that. So it's definitely HTML. So it's rendering directly through the browser, through the web page. Now, in this case, there is no function in Google. It's something that I've injected using this command, right? How is it done? Like I said, you're just using the command. So if we come here, I'm using the execute JavaScript and I'm executing this guy. So alert, which is the pop-up, it's an alert pop-up. And I'm telling it to say back to me, hello world. And that's what it is. And you can run any command, any function that is on the page or that you've injected into the page. It's up to you. So if you had a function, my square root, you could do it that way. If it was my square root where you provided a variable, an argument, it would be done that way. So very simple to do. Okay, links. The issue with links in web pages. Let's take a look at it and then we'll come back to explaining it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come here, take this guy here. I just want to check something. Let's get rid of the trusted domains for a second. We're going to come back to it. So we have a simple web page. So the web browser goes to Google. We're going to do a normal search like we've seen before. Actually, what I want is add-ins. So we're going to come to this page. Now, right off the bat, it doesn't work, right? And we know it doesn't work because I've redirected. So we expected this. That's fine. So I'm doing this step by step on purpose here. So we're going to add back our trusted domains, and DevHut is trusted and will allow me to navigate to it, okay? Now that we've done that, now we can go on Google. We can go to DevHut add-ins, go to it. Now it worked fine. But now when we come here, you're going to see the barcode, once again, is going to open in the full-blown edge. Now, that once again is because of the trusted locations, the trusted domains. So let's right-click on this, copy the link. Now I can come into my trusted domains and I can add it. Okay? So now we've said that that link is acceptable. Now, however, if we click on it, you'll see the behavior doesn't change. Why is that? Because it seems the web browser caches that table when it loads. So although we changed it, it doesn't know that it's changed. So we have to actually exit out of it and reload it for the trusted domains to be updated in the, I guess, browser cache in some shape or form. So we now do the dev-hut add-ins, go on the web page, and now we're going to see the true nature of the issue here. If we come down to the URL and we click on it, as you can see, it's made a pop-up outside of Access, but it's not in Edge either. Okay? And as you see, we have no toolbar. I'm not quite sure what this is. I think it's a web view too, but I could be wrong. It could be something related to Edge. I truly don't know. I haven't investigated too thoroughly, to tell you the truth, because I don't want this behavior anyway for my user. I don't want these pop-up windows. It makes no sense. So what can we do if we don't want these types of pop-ups? We've made it a trusted domain, and yet it's still pushing it. Well, this is where we have to use a little bit of JavaScript. The issue, if we right-click on Inspect, and this also is going to raise another issue, as we're going to see in a second. I told it I wanted to inspect this specific line, but when you click on the Inspect the first time, it always loads you to the body of the page. Every time I've attempted, it always goes there. So you have to do Inspect a second time. Then it will bring you to that instance of what you actually were interested in. And the issue is here. It's because of this target blank. And that tells the web page that you are to open this in a blank window, blank tab, depends. So if we just remove this guy, okay, and we try it, you'll see it works. Okay, this is the behavior I want in my application. I want it to stay in my application. So how do we achieve this without having to edit code like that? Because there's no way you can expect users to do that. Well, that's where you come in here on the design. And on the web browser, I always use the onDocument complete. So when it's finished loading the document, we're going to use this guy here. And if we look on the web page, that's where we were. And what it's going to do is it's going to build an array from the current document of all the links, A, that have a target of blank. So those that we're targeting that specific attribute. And we're going to say for all of them, remove it. Remove the attribute. So we're telling it remove what makes it open in a separate pop-up or separate tab. And how we do that, we use that command and we execute the JavaScript against the web page. So in fact, when the page loads, we tell it, go and remove all the targets from the links. So by doing that, now, when we go on to the page, and we do the dev-hut add-ins, and we scroll down to, well, we could use any one we wanted. Now when we click on it, it just works. I don't have to edit anything, and the pop-ups cease. Now everything is directly in the web page itself. So obviously some of you may not want that behavior, some of you do, but at least you have an option now to override it if you want to. Printing a web page. Compared to the old browser control, we've lost some functionality, as I mentioned here, because we lost the ability to do the object document. And because we no longer can call commands like these two. So where does that leave us? That leaves us that all we can do is invoke JavaScript commands. And that basically means, because I'm not an expert in this, to my knowledge, it's Windows print. So if you come to the browser print, once it loads, you'll have the print button. And as you can see here, it brings up the print dialog. And you can change your printer. You can do everything you can normally do. Change the page range, the color, etc. Bring up more settings and just print it out. Or cancel it. That's all there is to it. We get into retrieving information. We can't do this right now. Once again, it all comes down to the bug with the RetrieveJavascriptValue. It doesn't work. So at a later date, I will cover all of this. The information is there. You can look it over, and maybe once it's fixed and working, you'll be able to just use it as is. I will do a video at a later date once this is all rectified. Same thing here. I can't demonstrate any of this. Navigating the file system. Well, the old browser control enabled us to browse the file system. You could actually give it a path, and it would bring you there with a listing of all the files. You could go through different folders, subfolders, etc. The new web browser does not support that, so you can't do that anymore. Q&A, some of this has already been answered, so I'm going to skip. Well, so we won't skip. We'll do them quickly. Do I need Edge installed on my computer for this to work? No. Okay, this is part of, I'm assuming, Access or Office. I'm not quite sure how they stitched it in there, but no, you do not need Edge on your computer. Acrobat, no, you don't need third-party PDF viewers to be able to read a PDF. The web browser, all modern web browser controls automatically support it typically. So once again, you don't need Acrobat. Will it work with older versions? No, it won't work, but it won't stop them from working. It just shows up as a blank. So you have to have MS365. Will it work with runtime? Yes, only if you have the new MS365 runtime. Then I have the demo, which is what we've briefly discussed. A few links here as to the few resources I found. As you see, there isn't much because there isn't much out there. You can Google, you won't find anything. And that's also why I put together this web page to try to fill the gap. And I originally wanted to go advanced automation. I can't really get into it because, once again, the retrieve JavaScript value doesn't work. All I'll say today is basically, in the old browser, we would do this, okay? So we'd simply assign an HTML document variable. We'd set it to the web browser object document. As I mentioned, this no longer exists, so we can't do that anymore. A lot of trial and error, eventually I figured out that we could do this instead, okay? So I've been able to get back to where we were previously by doing this little, a gymnastic exercise where I define an HTML document first, where I populate it, and then I pass that over to the HTML document that we previously always were familiar with using and parsing and whatever else you wanted to do with the web page. So just know there is a workaround now, and we'll have to explore it at a later date. What else do I have for you? We can't do the metadata. That's the advanced stuff. Same thing, page source. We can't discuss it today. We've done all of these. Oh, set value. That's an interesting one. Just to show a little bit more of what you can do with automation here. Let's run it, and then I'll tell you how it's done. So I'm going to load Bing by default. Okay, so we've come into Bing. And just to show a little bit of what you can do through automation is I'm going to push using a button and access what I want to search for. So I'm going to click here. Look where it says search the web. And there's what I've asked it to search for, Microsoft Access Modern Web Browser. And then once I've done that, I actually want to run the search. So now I can press Perform Search in Access, and it actually performs the search. So as you can see, you can automate things here. It's possible. How am I doing this? Very easy. We've already seen the command. It always comes back to knowing the JavaScript to make it happen. But if we just look very briefly here, the first one to set the search term, we're using execute JavaScript, and then it's a JavaScript command. So I'm telling it, find the element. I knew that search input, the element itself, it had the ID of SB_form_Q. And I'm telling it, go find that element, set its value to what I want to search for. So it executes that, and that's what it does. Now, how did I perform the search itself? Well, it's simple. Once again, the form, it's actually a web form. So I identified the web form by looking at the source code of the Bing page. And when I found the name of that form, then I just go get that form and submit it. And that's what it does. So as you can see with this execute JavaScript, you can do all sorts of automations. It's just a question of looking at things and figuring out what commands, and this is where it all comes down to knowing JavaScript. Let's just quickly look at how did I do that? How did I figure some of this out? Like I said, the beauty now is we have developer tools. So if you come here and do inspect, now remember the first time it always goes to the body. So we let it load up eventually. Wow, this is painful. Okay, and then we do it a second time. Inspect. Now it's going to bring me to the right place. Okay, so I'm able to see here with the search area, it's a text area, and it has the ID of SB form Q. So that's where I got that from. Oops, sorry. Okay, SB form Q. Now, how did I know about form? Well, you can deduct it by their naming manner, but all I did is I came back up and I started looking, form. And you come across and you'll find that the form that it's in was SB form. And that's the SB form here. And you just need to know in JavaScript you can do submit. So that's how it's done. That's the beauty now, is you can actually do some of this directly in Access and figure things out and go straight from Access to the VBA with ease and do your coding without having to, load, unload a web page, and you can do it all directly there. Yeah, that's basically going to be it for today because of the issue that we're facing. I can't show you the advanced stuff. We'll come back to it, I promise, at a later date, because it's quite interesting how you can use the feature to go get the source code and do different automation with it. So once again, thank you for spending a bit of time with me. I hope this is helpful to some of you out there. Like, subscribe, share as much as you can. It is the best way to help me. It's those likes, shares, drop me comments. It's the way I'm able to continue doing these. The other thing, please, if I've missed something glaring, please drop me a comment, whether it's in YouTube or on my blog. Let me know of anything I may have missed, because I would truly like to continue to expand on this page here and add anything else that can be useful to people. So thank you very much once again. Have a great day, and we will see you in the next video.